Welcome to Get Serious, and today do I have a story for you. So many of you who have tuned in over the last month or so know that we were dealing with that absolute lemon of a property in the middle of Tennessee that we listed for absolute auction. Again, to quickly recap, is roughly 25 acres that just had a power line going through it. It did have utilities, but critically, what we missed is that the property was listed twice within the last 12 to 18 months. And at its most recent listing, it was listed for like 100K and did not move. And we had bought it for about 90,000. And so we hadn't been getting any activity, really any, on our listing. And we had listed it for an absolute auction through a premier brokerage in the area. And the setup was that it was going to be a 3-week auction period where the terms were absolute. So as long as there was one bidder and the bidding started at 5K, if they were the only bidder that showed up, that means we would have to accept that price and eat whatever loss there was, no reserve. So naturally, super stressful scenario, plus, already dealing with, a highly risky property that hadn't moved when it was previously listed, or with us. And I've detailed the back and forth during this process in previous podcasts, but the auctioneer just kept mentioning, hey, a lot of the activity, it really only happens like the last 48 hours prior. We only got a few bids. I think up and through this weekend, like 2.5 weeks into the whole bidding process, we were only at like 15K in bids. Maybe we got to 20K by Monday morning. Recording this on a late Thursday when the auction ended. So, there's a huge gap here, and I was just trying to distract myself. What type of loss we're looking at? The auctioneer is like, hey, he was turning over all these different rocks on uncovering these possible buyers, every possible avenue, to where I was still thinking, hey, like this like we wouldn't have found some of these buyers anyway. Even if we had it listed, he was getting out of state people registering. They had a huge online presence. He was on the boots on the ground, talking to various builders and construction groups, even some next door neighbors who owned parcels that directly touched our property. So, you could not think of a better buyer pool to potentially work with and just have this, accelerated timeline to potentially get to a close. So it was one of the best executed marketing blitzes I'd ever seen, but it was just and the auctioneer kept saying, hey, this is just it's a really nasty property. So we're not sure what's going to happen here. And then the auctioneer called me. He said, hey, been doing this a long time, usually like 48 hours out. I have a pretty good idea on how things are going to go. He had called me, like roughly, again, 48 hours ago. It's still hard to imagine. And he's like, dude, this is not looking good. To where he's thinking, just based on all the conversations I've been having and, people kind of showing their hand on what they might bid for this property, we're probably looking at like 50 to 60K exit. Getting to CK would be an absolute home run, but probably not going to get there. And that was a true just punch to the gut. I had to accept, hey, there's possibility we're just going to get destroyed on this property. But when I talked to the auctioneer, he's like, no, I have investors involved. They're never going to let the margin ever get too far away from what true market value is. This thing is going to be bid up. And he was feeling really confident about that. But just, after this whole marketing blitz, this is just not looking good at all. And so, after that conversation, it was just kind of a blur afterwards, and I was just stewing in anger at myself, because ultimately, the buck falls on me for any of the decision making that goes into different assets. And I just, I had to take a really hard look at myself and just realize, hey, we had such a profitable last 12 months or so of our business. Most of my income is derived from driving really solid profits. And here, I might have just collapsed a huge return by just eating a terrible loss. And so I was just already trying to mentally accept, yeah, I'm about to lose 50 grand on a terrible deal that we had no business getting involved with. Obviously, so many things got wrong. And we had bought that when, the macro economy was a bit better. We had structured it to where we had a lot of protections in place in case there was some variation in this property in terms of the exit. I probably flip-flopped 20 or 30 different times on whether to buy or not, and unfortunately landed on the wrong decision where I just didn't trust my instincts enough, and we ended up investing in this property that, okay, we're going to be eating a 50K loss. And how do we get around that? How do I ensure this never happens again? And also accepting in myself that, hey, you're not at the level that you need to be. Like, if you really want to be the best in this, like you're going to have to step up further. Like, this is this is a true wake up call. Like, maybe you can eat one of these losses one more time. We're not trying to just like, hey, full stop. I'm never going to invest in like questionable or even poor characteristic properties, even if we have a ton of protections baked in. I don't want to ever do them again. Don't want to even have the risk of something slipping by like this property did, and just realize, hey, I need to put even more time into this business and ensure that this never happens again. Like, I was just letting that anger just flow and just fuel me into just being better, knowing that, hey, this is the only route forward. You're going to earn a lot less this year, but what can you do? And I also had to report this to my business partner who, I really wanted to steward our company. He had a honeymoon. He's gone for overseas for 2.5 weeks. And I was routinely like updating him. And I was like, this has been a pretty rough few weeks for the company in a lot of ways. And I really wanted to deliver him better news. And here, like, he just got back, and I'm like, we have to mentally prepare ourselves. I think we're going to eat a 50K loss per what the auctioneer is telling us. And he was just like, yeah, okay. And I was just feeling so bad about that. And, that into that evening and the following day, it's just like, okay, what are these next steps that you need to do? Like, what and how do I need to be better? And that following day, so yesterday, it was a really productive time, actually. It's really catching up a lot of Kellen's accelerate to automate work and just laying down further foundations. I was getting a ton done from the land pricer engineering side. I'm controlling what I could control and just, okay, got to move forward. You got to be a better operator. What are these steps that you can just push and let this, negative feeling towards yourself and your decision making be able to energize you for doing better in the future? And so that was my approach from the mindset perspective, and also just trying to distract myself. I'm like, it's not over till it's over. We have no idea, even, that prediction, because, the bids were still sitting at, I think, about 30K at that point. So, there was no guarantee we were even going to get to 50K. 50 or 60K that the auctioneer was quoting. So we were still short of that. And to update you through that process, so then the auctioneer called me roughly 24 hours ago, and he's like, hey, I'm feeling a lot better about this than I was the previous day. He's like, you know what? I think we're going to end up closer to 75, 80. It's not going to get you to the break even, like including our closing costs. Like, I was really targeting 95Ks where I'd be, okay, we are breaking even on this deal, even net of overhead on this property. And so, like, hey, that's like a 50% jump than what you were telling me yesterday. It's way, if it's not going to be a 50K loss, maybe it'll be a 20K loss instead. It's still going to hurt, but not quite as bad. And so, there's a little bit more optimism there. And he's like, hey, I talked to some of these couple other construction guys here that really know the area. They're registering the bid right now. He had a couple other buyer's agents reach out to him. He's like, yeah, they're going to be registering their buyers, and they're excited to participate in this. And, all of their other online pushes, email, social, etc., that all got pushed out yesterday as well. And so you got hey, the deadline is really coming up here, less than 24 hours. Like if you want to, try to get on this train, this is your last chance. So like that was encouraging to hear. But it's still going to be like a nastier loss, one of the biggest losses we ever ate. Possible 20K or so at the new estimate from the auctioneer. So it's still what can we do? And also during this, like my assistant Melvin was, he was pushing so hard on his end too. Like we were utilizing his Facebook account to share the auction listing over this previous weekend across all the various different Tennessee land groups. I had talked about this in previous podcasts. We had already used my account for it. So he was doubling up on his account and was even getting some responses. We were trying to link people. Hey, like whatever activity we can spur, this is what we need to do. Like push. Like our business is like, this is just a critical timing to sort things out. So I really credit Melvin for stepping up there too. And so then that brings us into today. And I could have been like staying up all night and just stressing. And I just forced myself, hey, I'm not going to be checking the auction. Like, it's the end point is going to be noon Central today, this Thursday, June 12th. And the auctioneer said, hey, he's going to call me at like 10 a.m. Central, 2 hours before. So I just didn't let myself check like what will be, I'll start like getting stressed, an hour or something beforehand and wait for the auctioneer to call me, but try to get a good night's sleep, and was able to do that, work out in the morning, all of that. And so once I was like fully present, all right, going to take a look at the auction site. So around 10 a.m., we were sitting at 50K. And so at least we had hit that minimum point that the auctioneer was pointing out a couple days prior. It's still going to be, 50K loss. all said and done. But it wasn't at the very end of the auction. Like there was still room to go, and the auctioneer was like, I still think we're gonna be getting there. The people bidding so far, these are still more the out of state guys, the construction guys he had talked with. They haven't started bidding yet, so let's see where we go. And so at that point, I started, I think, refreshing the page every 5 minutes or so, as of, I don't know, like the last 90 minutes or something before the auction was ending. And I think, roughly 90 minutes or so before the auction ended, it got up to 58K. Like, all right, that's looking better. It's cutting our losses down a little bit more, but I didn't see the guy that the auctioneer was saying, hey, these construction guys, where are they at? And he said, they're going to be bidding, they're going to be bidding. And then things just didn't change. I think we were down to 30 minutes, and I was still trying to distract myself and, trying to do some other like catch up work with the AI programming. But it was just, staring down this potential loss. You have no idea how this is going to go. And from what my memory, like, again, this is such a blur, but I think we were getting down to like below 10 minutes left in the auction. And we were still sitting at like roughly 60K in bids, and I'm like, all right, my stomach was just in knots and just sweating bullets. And I'm like, okay, well, 35K, about to eat this loss. It's not that 75-80 that the auctioneer was quoting the day before, but not like I can do anything about it. And so again, this was like sub 10 minutes left, and then we were getting down to right around the 5-minute mark, 11:55 Central. And this bidding war starts. So I described this before, but up until like 50K in bids, it was 5K increments. And then up to 75K, it was 2K increments. Anything beyond 5K was $1,000 increments for the bidding. And when you got down to, I think it was like, whatever the terms were, it was sub 5 minutes left within the auction process, and somebody else bid, that would add another 5 minutes onto the timer. So, let people kind of think ahead if they still wanted to participate. And these two guys started going at it with a bidding war, and it started creeping up. Here we were, 60K, 62K, 64K. Now we were actually past noon. And I was like, all right, we're closing the gap. We are, And then all of a sudden it would, kept going up 70K into 75K. And I'm like, all right, we are right where the auctioneer was was mentioning a day ago. We hit that limit. Now we're at like a 20K loss, still painful, but in the right direction. And it kept going up. And at this point, I think right around the 80K mark, like an auctioneer called me and he's like, yeah, one of these guys bidding. It's one of the construction guys he had talked with yesterday, and this other guy had never even called him, just a mystery bidder. Also, he was in Nashville, which is fairly distant from wherever the property was, but he didn't know who this guy was. But the other builders in the area, like, they were extremely both cash and asset rich. So he's like, yeah, if these guys can just keep bidding, who knows how long? Like, they are very well financed. And he was just describing his strategy, and he's like, again, been doing this a while. Like, when I'm trying to reach out to some of these builders, like, he doesn't like to give them, 2 weeks of DD where they can really talk themselves out of a deal. And that's a strategy with auctions. Like, okay, there's real time pressure here. You have very limited time. And I used to invest in tax deed auctions. And yeah, that's like, you can kind of start getting caught and just, it's really easy to click a button online auction and just, okay, keep bidding up, keep bidding up. So you don't want to lose out from it, even if the numbers don't necessarily make sense. So you completed all your DD. And it worked in this case. It was like, hey, he's got the hooks in. Again, he only found these builders a day prior to the auction ending, like, just such a stroke of luck. And now they were involved in a bidding war. And then it kept going up and kept going up. And then all of a sudden we were at, we hit the 95K mark. And I'm like, holy cow, this is unbelievable, where I thought there was no chance, absolutely no chance, based on what we had talked about, that we're going to break even on this deal. Again, less than 48 hours ago, I thought I was going to lose 50K. Now I'm broke even, and still the bidding wasn't done. I was again on the line with the auctioneer and like his whole brokerage. They were watching this, like, yeah, these guys are just they're going at it here, and kept bidding up. And after like roughly 45 minutes past the initial due date of the auction, we ended up with a final closing price of $117,000. And it actually got sold to the mystery bidder in Nashville. So he outlasted the well-financed group that was more local. And again, keep in mind, there's a 10% buyer's premium that they have to pay on top of their price. So it's almost like 130K all in for that. And on our sell side, it's like probably sub $1,000 worth of title costs, barely anything. We don't have to pay a commission. And I had asked the auctioneer, like, have you ever dealt, this is great to hear. Like, this is just absolutely wild. But, the money's not going to be in our account yet. Probably like another 30 days to close. Have you ever dealt with a buyer default? And he's like, no, it's never happened. He had one where they had to extend like 2 weeks, but no defaults. And the language and the terms are pretty nasty. Like, you can, if you default as a seller or buyer, you're opening up yourself to a lawsuit in a major way there. So there's a lot of teeth to these auction agreements. Plus 10% is just due at the end of the auction as well. So you're already locked in with some initial payment there. So, just throwing that in for consideration. But the emotional roller coaster here is just, it's even hard to describe, where again, less than 2 days ago, where I thought I'm going to eat the worst loss I've ever had in the land business, and start to question my own capabilities, to now we exit not just minimizing a loss, not just breaking even, but actually getting like a solid profit on it. And, some of the protections that we had built in to this deal with this particular investor was that we would get the first 15K of profit on the deal without having to do any splits. So we're actually going to retain pretty much everything from this. Maybe there's be a little bit left over. And, we always try to get a 1.2x net MOIC on our deals, and we're basically going to be there. Multiple on invested capital. Like, it is just stunning. I'm still kind of reeling emotionally from this. It's just one of the most stressful experiences these past few weeks here, where again, you're eating it and not knowing where you're going to end up on this thing until literally the last 5 minutes of the auction. It's high risk, high reward here. Like we got bailed out by a miracle. And again, like thinking about the implications here, I know this is a longer podcast, but it's just a wild story that, this auctioneer found these other construction guys locally 24 hours before the auction was done. They didn't even end up winning, but they served their role. They bid up this other guy, and we ended up with a profitable exit on this property. And that really went back to my instincts on this deal when we uncovered, okay, yeah, this thing was listed and didn't move, that an auction was going to be our best shot. It's higher risk, but a lot of auctions are done well in Tennessee. And they're like, okay, if listing is just not going to be a good like, how do we possibly do this? And look, it did end up working where the property didn't sell for $100K listed, and now on an auction, it sold for above that previous listing price. So, we had never participated in an auction before on the sell side, at least, but like it proved out, hey, this is a viable card to play. I probably wouldn't consider it as a primary, because again, the fact that this was one of the worst properties we've ever owned still worked out well with an auction. Like if you actually brought like a really solid property to auction, that you had a ton of margin in, that could be an interesting route to go just right off the bat, instead of just listing a property for areas like Tennessee or Kentucky that have a lot more routine online auctions. I'd probably actually consider that. But again, the stress involved with just knowing it's an absolute auction, and that if people don't show up, you are just you have no floor. You can get eat a disgusting loss. Probably lower floor, higher ceiling within auctions. But even though it worked out for us, like basically a miracle here, a scenario I did not think was going to be possible in the remotest. The auctioneer didn't think it was going to be possible. None of his team did. None of the whole brokerage did. It ended up working out in our favor. Like this is not an experience I would ever seek to repeat. I'm not attributing any skill associated with, like there was skill to swap our strategy to going towards an auction versus listing, because I think it was, this was just going to accelerate our anticipated outcome versus what we might get in a list process anyway. But the still the true core lessons was like we had no business buying this property in the first place, and I still have to take like full fault. Like we escaped by the skin of our teeth here. Pulled the victory out of the jaws of defeat. But I'm not attributing anything beyond just like ridiculous luck to get out of this. And all of those previous thoughts and mindsets and lessons from the last few days still apply. Like I still have to be way, way better as an operator than I had been to avoid getting into deals like this. We've shifted our criteria to not look at anything that's questionable or poor in characteristics ever again. We have a better process for figuring out whether properties were ever listed prior. And I just want to move to higher value properties in general, north of 200K purchase price deals that might require a lot more focus into them, but it's less distracting. Like I've just found, okay, within the portfolio, just things slip through the cracks, and lower priced properties I just didn't give the attention that they deserved as well here. So I'd rather focus on less properties on average where there's just less chance of things to slip through the cracks, even if the total dollar amount is higher. Because some of those higher dollar ones, like the Texas one, and now we just got another written offer for $750K on our $400K buy, and that should be able to close in 30 days. So like we're going to get another really, really solid exit, be flush with cash again. And our Louisiana one is looking really good too at the moment, and that's like barely begun. So I'd rather do a lot more of that and just, okay, no more of these questionable properties. Infill lots are basically being phased out too. That's our other problem Tennessee property that we're probably going to eat a small loss on it, but it's impossible to lose 50K on it because we only spent 35 total, and we have some interest now right at that 35 mark. So it's probably going to be a small loss, but it's I have to get out of that. Now that we got out of this auction property, that's our last problem property to get out of. But we're starting to right the ship a little bit over this last week, whether it's via luck or some level of skill. Sometimes you need a combo of both, but still, I've never been now more determined to be like, okay, there's still a huge gap in where you are versus where you want to be from an operator perspective. And again, I just have to look in the mirror, accept that reality, and be humble enough to know there's still a lot of work to do and I can be better and I know I can get there, as well as my team behind me. So this is definitely the longest pod. If you stuck with me this whole time, I'm sure you could appreciate the journey. It's definitely one of the wildest stories. And I want to share a lot more of these insights also within the newsletter as well here. So again, sometimes you just got to survive one way or another, figure out a way to do it. Just ridiculous luck, true miracle here. SeriousLand.capital for any of your funding needs, land daily diligence, zero cost review of your land deals, and landpricer.ai for the most reliable land pricing tool on the market. Subscribe and share. Hope you enjoyed this one. Talk to you next time. Bye.